Welcome to Meet Your Legislators. I'm Mark Hill, your moderator for our program. Before we begin, we'd like to take a moment and thank Vincennes University for their commitment to this program. They are a valuable partner in our community. Joining us for our program today is State Representative Bruce Borders from District 45. Representative Borders is from Jasonville. His district includes all of Sullivan and Greene counties and portions of Knox, Davies, and Vigo counties. Representative Borders, welcome to our show. It's been a while since I last saw you, and a lot has happened, and so I thought it might be a good place to start by reminding people about what committees you serve on in the State House.
Okay, I serve on the Insurance Committee.
Okay.
I also serve on the Local Government Committee, and I serve on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee.
Okay.
So three different committees there.
Right, okay. And then in terms of currently, the legislature is they're in the long session.
Right,
So
the budget year, yeah.
Right.
Biennial budget every 2 years.
Right, so in the odd years, we have a long session, and the even years, we have a short session.
Sure, exactly.
So, and you are about a month to go in the
Right.
process of current status, and your thoughts are that the legislature will probably finish on time.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of I know there's a process where some bills start in the House and then some bills start in the Senate, and then we go to crossing over between the two. Can you kind of let us know just the basic flow right now where we are in that process?
I mean, a bill on first reading means it literally goes to a committee. For example, let's say it goes to the Insurance Committee on the House side, and that the first reading is when it gets heard in committee. And if that bill passes out of committee, then it gets handed down to go to either the House floor or over on the Senate side to the Senate floor, and that's where any member can offer up an amendment to potentially be included in that bill. And sometimes it's a strip and insert, which means that it literally wipes out the whole bill and they put all their language in it. It doesn't happen often. I mean, people try it on a moderately regular basis or semi-regular basis. It just oftentimes doesn't get accomplished, but and then once a bill passes on second reading with whatever amendments get offered, it then goes to third reading, which is the final reading. And then if it passes out of the House, then it will go over to the Senate and vice versa. And then some bills that are considered of a really important nature, not that all of them don't have importance, at least particularly to the author, they'll be offered up the same or similar language. The same bill will be offered up on the House and then on the Senate side, and that gives both sides of the aisle, so to speak, or both sides of the State House an opportunity to tweak it with amendments and so forth, and then they'll cross over. And so that happens quite often as well.
Okay, so I know we have a new governor, and Governor Braun came in with a number of priorities that he was seeking. So the first kind of big question that we wanted to talk about is the budget bill. But before we start with the budget bill, wanted to get your thoughts about his intent to lower property tax in the state, and maybe get a feel for where is that fitting currently amongst legislative action.
The bottom line is that he had some specific things, to lower taxes, I believe, lower than they were in 2022. Have some, stronger homestead exemptions, some things like that. And he was very adamant about that. Then the Senate took out some of the reductions that he wanted, not that they weren't wanting property tax relief for Hoosiers, but they just, they didn't. They looked at his solution, at least at the time being, as more of a temporary one. They were looking longer term, and then they had already spoken with Jeff Thompson, who's the chairman of Ways and Means. I call that the purse strings committee. It's in fact, Jeff is the author of House Bill 1001, which is the budget bill, the state's budget, which always by the Constitution has to originate on the House side of the aisle, which is the side I serve on. And the bottom line is what Jeff is looking at doing is looking at the long-term picture of it. And again, not that the governor isn't. The governor's wanting that as well, but he was looking for some immediate relief. And we're also looking for that on the House side as well, and the Senate, quite frankly. But what he's wanting to do is to make the property taxes more rate-based, meaning a certain percentage of the value of the home, as opposed to levy-based. Because he said what's happening is that with it being levy-based, meaning, whether it be a city levy, a town levy, county levy, library levy, whatever, all of these various groups that are wanting their own levy or their own piece of the pie, they're kind of getting in turf warfare. And the person who pays for that turf warfare is the property owner.
Right.
Whether that be the homeowner, whether that be the farmer, whether it be someone that owns a commercial business, although, farming is obviously a commercial business as well. But, and so Jeff said that as long as we have this happening, and he said they're bringing in these high-priced, lobbyists, quite frankly, that are using computer software, and and they're paying large amounts of money to basically get in the pocket of another levying group and so forth, and so it's becoming a turf battle. Again, the party losing is the property owner, and so what he's wanting to do is basically go to a rate-based system to where when someone runs for office, they'll go, hey, here's what your property tax rate is. Here's what percentage of your value you're being taxed on. I want to lower it to such and such, to where the property owner, it's not a bunch of mass confusion, because right now with the levy-based system there is a lot of confusion, and I will say that the property tax caps, people go, well, I thought we passed property tax caps. But what I tell people is, I said, I'll just, for simplicity's sake, I'll use a $100,000 home.
Okay.
All right, with a 1% cap, that means you're not going to pay more than $1,000 on it. But I, mentioned several years ago, I said the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is a good thing. That's a good protection for the property owner. But I said the 800-pound gorilla is when properties are reassessed. And property values are jumping radically. I mean, they truly are. I've been amazed in my hometown or home city of Jasonville what properties are selling for now. And so 1% of $200,000 is $2,000 versus 1% of the $100,000, which is $1,000. Well, and then somebody says, well, I thought I had a property tax cap. I said, you do, 1%. But as that assessed value goes up, and so what we're looking at doing is going to a rate-based system and some additional credits and so forth. And I actually talked with Jeff on the way down here this morning, and I said, Jeff, spoon feed me, kind of fill me in on where you guys are at. He's actually meeting with the group that's finalizing the plans on that, and he said that the vast majority of Hoosier property owners in 2026 will pay less than they are in paying in 2025. Now, this year, of course, the property taxes are always done a year in arrears. So this year, 2025, you're paying for the assessed value in 2024. He said this year, it is what it is. We'll be more or less stuck with that unless we're able to do some credits and so forth, which we might be able to do as well. And that's all being, as you and I are speaking, that's being hashed out at the State House right now. And so, again, the House, the Senate, and the Governor's office are all three looking for ways of reducing property taxes. And right now, I mean, the odds are, at the end of the day, my guess is it will probably be more the House version that will rule the day, because, again, of it having its longer-term nature to it, that's where we're at the moment.
Okay. And I really appreciate you detailing those kind of concerns, because I know that you serve on the local government subcommittee in the House, and
or committee.
The committee.
Not no, you're fine. You're fine. We're friends. So.
Right. So the concern, I think, that I've heard the general public, and of course I have served for many years myself with the Vincennes City Council and now with the Board of Works, is that if there is a significant reduction in property tax, then the likelihood is that a lot of those expenses that are going to fall on local governments, both city and county, as well as these other taxation entities, you mentioned the schools and the libraries, and how they will adjust to their needs and subsequently have to pass on perhaps additional taxes to the local consumers. So you're being in connection with local government.
Sure.
You hear that from cities and counties?
All the time.
Right.
I mean, literally every day. And in fact, we had a bill, not to try to dissuade from this conversation, I'll get back into it, but
Sure.
back when there was a bill authored by one of the state reps on doing away with township government.
Okay, yes, that comes up periodically.
Well, on a Sunday night, I was literally on the phone for 5 straight hours, and mostly with local fire chiefs, whether it be the local volunteer departments, city departments, and so forth. And so, I have received a ton of calls on that issue from whether it be city council members, whether it be mayors, whether it be county council members, county commissioners, et cetera. And what I've told them is, I said, I'm not trying to play coy, but I said, until we get something hard and fast in writing, and I said, I promise you, you've got my cell number, call me, and I'll be glad to fill you in on the details as we go along. And I mean, literally on the way down here this morning, I was on the phone with the guy that writes the state's budget. And so I can't promise you that I know enough to. I hate to say, well, I just don't know at this point, but I don't. And Jeff isn't quite sure, but he's got a group with him and the numbers crunchers, and they're working on that. And so I'll know more on Monday. Is what I'll find out.
Great. Well, I appreciate you again detailing all those various impacts, and of course, now looking at since this is the longer session and the economic impact of taxation and funding of various groups, education is by far the largest piece of the pie that the House and Senate both manage. And so knowing that, what do you see as the current changes or potential changes that may be coming down the pike in education funding?
Actually, in education funding, I think it was like a 2% increase each year for the next 2 years, and since the budget is a biennial budget, and it may be 2 point something, but a bit more or less about 2% per year. And again, it's is it as much as some people would like? No, but is it still a fairly healthy increase when you look at the total picture? Absolutely. And then one of the things that I'll mention as well, that this time we're not playing with House money, and what I mean by that is that in the past, because of COVID, the federal government was literally just throwing a lot of money at the states. Well, some states got themselves in big trouble with that, and what I mean by that is they looked at additional programs to come up with and ways of spending that.
Spend the money, right.
What we did in Indiana is we paid down debt, and we had already been doing that over the course of time. But as a result of that, we're not coming into this year going, oh my gosh, the federal government's not throwing all of this money at us. But I'm glad that they're not, and the reason I say that is when the federal government, in essence, prints dollars and throws at the states, what happens is our children and our grandchildren pay for that, or it ends up leading to inflation and things like that. And I'm not trying to blast one party or another. I mean, the bottom line is that is literally what was happening, and then states were playing with what I call house money. Well, now these are real dollars. And so, one of the things that's been happening lately, I've been getting a ton of calls from people saying, well, we heard that the pool at Shakamak is closing this summer. And
actually one of the questions that was submitted.
Oh, believe it or not, I've been getting more calls on that issue than any other singular issue, although I get a lot of calls on a lot of issues. But so I called Dan Bortner, and he's the head of the state parks. And so he said, no, Bruce, no. He said, here's what's going on. He said, the governor wants the state parks to basically be self-funding. And he said last year they lost, and I forget the exact figures, and I wish I had them in front of me at the moment, but it was several $1 million. I mean, in terms of the overall picture, they weren't in danger of closing or anything like that, so they're looking at ways in the state parks to make the parks fund themselves without other tax dollars coming in. And so, and that being discussed based on my conversation with Dan. In fact, he lives over in Bedford, I believe. And anyhow, he had met with a lot of the state park managers, maybe all of them, I'm going to guess, and said, listen, everything is on the table. We're trying to balance the budgets of the state parks. The governor's orders to balance the budgets. But everything being on the table does not translate into we're closing down the pool.
Right.
And so when I spoke with him, and then he also had one of his fiscal people get a hold of me as well. They said, well, no, we're looking at every avenue. Do we possibly raise the fee to get into the pool by 50 cents or $1 or whatever? But I told him, I said, well, people are very concerned about this. He said, no, he says, I did not tell anybody we were closing down the pools. Yeah. And then again, I don't want to, I mean, he's not here to defend himself, so I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. Yeah. But those are and the social media, I went on there and my name was like, that darn Bruce Borders, we love the pool, our kids enjoy it. Well, I swim in the pool. I love the pool too. I take my grandchildren out there, and it's not just Shakamak, it's all of the state parks and the pools. But the bottom line is they're looking at ways of balancing their budget. And so if I were to give a summary of what I would describe this year as, it's like, okay, don't expect a budget that's got any cherries and whipped cream on top. This is going to be a very plain vanilla budget, but it is going to be a fiscally sound budget, and we're also not going to throw a bunch of debt into the future on the shoulders of our children and grandchildren.
So I know that it's changing topics now into health-related kind of issues, that you authored or co-authored several pieces of legislation in the area of vaccination policies, and so I'm interested in if any of those pieces are moving farther down the pike, and of course there are implications at the federal level too, that there are a lot of changes coming within the health arena in terms of vaccination. So your thoughts about those pieces? Sure.
Well, one of the pieces of legislation that I offered, and this is one of the things of having served there for quite a length of time, quite frankly, but is you discover that just because my bill doesn't make it in under my name doesn't mean we can't find a home for it. It could be in an amendment. In one case, for example, and I'll come back to answering your question. Sorry, I know I get to chattering a bit, but like I had authored a piece of legislation for many years in a row, and you can check that out. But it prohibited people from changing their birth records from male to female or female to male, and that was actually brought to me by a judge who was saying that was wreaking havoc in the courts. Well, that actually became basically law this year. It's not in the statutes, but the governor made it an executive order, and so that actually passed. And so I was happy about that. Check that box off. But having to do with the vaccination language you were asking about, one of the bills that I authored had to do with basically people's with people having their medical records protected, because some employers were mandating, if you can't show that you've had this vaccine or that vaccine, we will fire you. And so it gives people a right to get basically to where their medical records can remain private unless it's between them and their doctor, and it gives them protection. And on the issue of the vaccine language, though, along with that, what I had offered up was and so that part of it actually made it into another bill, not as strongly as I wanted, but it did make it into another bill in the health committee. But the vaccine language basically said, if a vaccine is mandated, that vaccine has to have, I think it was 5 years of testing to make sure that it's safe for people. Because just like on the COVID vaccine, a friend of mine, I had encouraged her. I said, "Why don't you check into this deeply?" And how are we doing? Okay with time?
We're fine.
I encouraged her. I said I would do some more homework on that. Another friend of mine, and I won't name his name, but he's nationally known, and he was advocating that everybody get the vaccine. I said I wouldn't do that. I said if you want to get it, that's fine, but I wouldn't be encouraging others unless you've done more homework. Well, in this particular case, the young lady I'm speaking of, she ended up getting myocarditis, which is the hardening of the lining around the heart. She's no longer able to work. And this other friend of mine who's known on a national basis, same thing happened with him. And again, I know people that got the vaccine, no problems at all. Some within my own family, not my immediate family, but brothers, sisters, etc. But I want people to have the right to refuse, is the bottom line, to where they aren't mandated to do that. And so that's some of the language that I had offered up. And some of what I offered did make it into, it looks like it will make it into law anyhow. And the vaccine language we're not there yet. So.
Okay, all right. So I know that you'd authored a piece of legislation we talked about before we came on the air about the 10 Commandments and the possibility of requiring public schools to display those. Is that piece of legislation still active, or what's the status of that?
No, what happened on that is J.D. Prescott, he's a fellow state rep, he simply called me and asked me if I would be willing to go onto that bill with as a co-author, and I said sure, I'd be glad to, and took a look at it. And I actually had an interview the other day with a student journalist who's getting her degree in journalism, and she said, well, is that not violating the separation of church and state? I said, well, first of all, our Constitution doesn't have those words in it. I said it says that Congress shall make no law establishing a federal religion or protecting the free exercise thereof. I may not quite have the words exactly right, but it's pretty darn close to being the exact verbiage. I said, if you go into a classroom, I said, it's very common to see plaques on the wall about, don't bully and do this and do that. And I said, I happen to think that that basically telling people not to steal, not to murder, and so forth are some pretty good platitudes. And I said, whether they be the 10 Commandments or somebody wants to just call them good moral virtues, I have no problem with that. Again, it never made it anywhere, which I didn't think it probably would, but I thought it's not a bad message to send out. And then when you go through the 10 Commandments and explain them to people, they're like, well, that's not so bad. It's like, I said, well, I'm pretty happy that that they are what they are. Now, I do happen to believe that they did come from our Heavenly Father, but that, and there may be people that disagree with that, but I think they're good. They are the 10 Commandments, but the bottom line is they're good, pretty nice moral laws to live by.
So let me ask you a couple questions that we've gotten from our public. Several of them were about vaccinations, which I think you've kind of answered where those issues are currently, so I won't repeat those. I did have a constituent, Amanda Jackson, that asked about, because this was coming about in the earlier pieces of legislation where both congressmen as well as state and representatives and state senators were holding town hall kind of meetings or conversations. And so our viewer, Amanda, wanted to know, are you willing to have town hall kind of meetings or conversations so the general public can ask these kind of questions that we're posing today?
I will absolutely do that. In fact, I've been thinking about that as this year's been a strange year in that we've had so many, I told everybody, I said, this is going to be a hard year for the simple reason that, again, we're not playing with house money. There's not all this government, the federal money being thrown at us. And so a lot of things, I've never seen a year where more things are in flux than they are this year. And I truly mean that. Normally we have a much more concrete view of where things are going to be at. But I would love to do that. And I don't care if people disagree with me on stuff, because what I found, you and I don't always agree on things. We have our little chats afterwards and so forth, but I still consider you a friend and a very dear friend. And so I love having those conversations because I learn from them, but also it's just like the question on the swimming pools. It gives me a chance to say, hey, I talked to the top dog, the guy that's over the state parks, and here's what they say. So yeah, I'll be more than happy to do that.
So one more quick question here that we're from a viewer, Michelle, who lives on a fixed income and and her utility bills now have gone up, and there's some proposed rate increases in our area around utility costs. So her question was, what can you do as a state legislature to kind of protect us in this process?
Well, in fact, I've got some notes on that. I was looking to see where I had that. But basically, one of the things that we're dealing with, let me find that bill number. Well, and this is going to, anytime you mention the word nuclear, you make people, you make them nervous. But we actually, on the House side, and it's over on the Senate, passed a bill basically dealing with the creation and the proliferation of small nuclear reactors. And one of the things that we know is that, it's really funny, those people that oppose coal, they're like, well, let's just go electric. Well, they forget that like 80 or 90% of electric comes from the burning of coal, right? Sure. And so I tell them, I remind them, I don't know that they ever knew that. They just somehow, the electric just gets endowed from on high, Right. But anyhow, we are working on that issue to help bring down costs. And then, one of the things that I would encourage everybody to do, as basic as this sounds, is literally have your furnace checked out on the filter, have your furnace repairman come in. I mean, I've been amazed. We own some rental properties as stuff that we find out. We've found in some cases where bills have literally been cut in half just by properly servicing a furnace.
So believe it or not, we're kind of at
Wow.
the end of the close.
That went fast.
So, as we close, could you please tell people how they can contact you? We talked about town hall meetings, but obviously there are simpler ways that people can contact you.
I want to do the town hall meetings. Let me just, I've got my 2 State House phone numbers. Let me get those out. All right. One of them is 317-232-9722, or if you want to call the toll-free number, it's 800-382-9841, or you can email me at in.gov /H45, as in the House District 45. Again, in.gov /H45.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Representative Borders. And so on behalf of Vincennes PBS and our legislators program, I'm Mark Hill. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.